Hello everyone, my name is Kelly Bonjavingo and today I am going to present to you a webinar that focuses on how to create an integrated and differentiated curriculum unit. Let's first discuss what an integrated curriculum unit with differentiation is. It is a unit that provides students with content that can become connected and intertwined between disciplines. These types of units provide differentiation so that the needs of all learners are being met through performance tasks and assessments. An integrated curriculum unit also provides educators with a way to meet each student's learning style. The benefits of an integrated curriculum unit with differentiation are endless for both educators and students. But according to Yarker and Park, the most important piece would be that students are able to build connections through multiple content areas and disciplines, which allows them to take their learning beyond the classroom walls and into the real world through real world-based scenarios and content. Here you will see the process or table of contents that we will discuss on how to build, create, and implement an effective integrated curriculum unit with differentiation included. There are 9 steps to the process, which include assessing your learner population, choosing a theoretical framework appropriate to your learner population, deciding on content areas and disciplines that will be taught, choosing a design pathway or approach for your unit, utilize the backwards design to plan, creating performance tasks and assessments, developing lessons that include differentiation, teaching your integrated unit, and last but not least, evaluating your unit for future success. Let's take a look at the first step in the process, which is assessing your learner population. This step is vital in creating a successful and well-rounded integrated curriculum because you need to make sure that what you are teaching is suitable for your learners, the environment in which they learn, and meeting their needs. It must be tailored to who is participating in the learning, and to assess learner population, you must collect data and information from 3 different categories. The first being academic data. Some pieces of data to take into consideration in this category are state reports, standardized test scores, work records, grades, portfolios, and present or past performances. The next category for data reporting would be demographic data, which includes age, location, ethnicity, race, religion, gender, and family size. The last category would be the needs of your learners. In this category, you really want to get specific when you look at the strengths and weaknesses of your students, what their learning and assessment styles are, any preferences on when it comes to setting, academic needs, and if students have an IEP or 504 plan. Of course, there are many other pieces of information to take into consideration, but these are just some ideas when starting to build your unit. Now that you have assessed your learner population, you will be taking part in the learning process. The next step is to choose a theoretical framework that is appropriate to your learner population. The 4 that we will discuss are cognitivist, constructivist, multiple intelligences, and brain-based learning. The first theoretical framework of cognitivist focuses on why we know things and not just how we know them. With this framework, the learner is in full control of their learning, driving it towards the assessment piece. This framework builds off of the background knowledge of learners to connect with their new learning. The next framework is the opposite of cognitivist and is known as constructivist. This framework focuses on building knowledge off of experiences in the world around us rather than just background knowledge. It is highly encouraged that students take risks within this framework and is meant for learners that are extroverted and prefer to work in group settings. Moving on to the multiple intelligence framework, which focuses on the many intelligences and learning styles that you might see within your classroom. This framework truly aligns with the saying that learning is not one size fits all and is based on the idea that not all students learn and show what they know in the same way, as cited by Alfori and Smotty. The last theoretical framework is brain-based learning, which focuses on the process students take with their learning and targets what is going on inside the brain. According to Thompson, within this framework, it is important to provide students with encouragement rather than critical feedback because you will see them thrive. At the end of the day, all of these theoretical frameworks are amazing, and it is just a matter of which framework is most suitable for your group of learners. Once you have chosen your framework, you are ready to start looking at what you are going to be teaching. It is time to move on to the next step of our process and think about the end goal that we have in mind. As an educator, you want to think about what content or standards you are going to teach your students. Although it is important to think ahead, you want to make sure that you are in the moment during this process and intentional. The backwards design can be utilized during this step to think about what you want your students to know, so that it can pave the way for how you want your students to get there. You want to make sure that the disciplines and content that you choose are aligned directly with your learner population and framework chosen for your unit. You will decide which standards you will focus on during your unit. This can vary depending on your classroom, learners, content, and how many standards should be embedded within the unit to be able to teach all standards throughout the year. You want to create expectations, goals, and objectives based on the standards chosen so that you know where your final destination is. When thinking about your expectations, goals, and objectives, it is important to remember that they need to be realistic and attainable for your learners and the environment that they will participate in. In the chart shown in blue, you will see an example of what it could look like in a second grade classroom if 3 content areas were chosen. A standard for each area would be taught, and an objective or expectation was derived from each standard to guide learning towards the next step. Now that we have figured out who will be doing the learning, which framework is most suitable for your audience, and what you will be teaching, we must now decide on the pathway or route that you will take in order to get to your final destination. The 4 pathways that we will discuss according to the American College of Education are interdisciplinary, which allows students to make connections within disciplines on an individual content basis, multidisciplinary, which is a pathway that students can make connections between disciplines while content areas are still on an individual basis, interdisciplinary, which is the connection between 2 or more disciplines or content areas, and transdisciplinary, which extends learning beyond disciplines and content areas. Let's take a closer look at each design pathway in a little more detail and use our discipline and standard examples for second grade. With the interdisciplinary approach, connections and content that is taught do not move across content areas or disciplines, but instead it stays within its own individual lane. This is very similar to a fragmented curriculum where all subjects are taught on a standalone basis. This approach requires a low level of integration and is the best fit for teachers who are just starting off in the classroom and getting their feet wet with curriculum standards. In the picture, you can see what an interdisciplinary approach would look like if we use the same 3 content areas previously discussed in our second grade example. Each subject and focus is taught on a standalone basis. Moving on to the multidisciplinary pathway, which allows all content areas and disciplines to still stand alone, but connections can be made around a central theme. According to Miller-Young, these connections are made solely through the learner, while the educator still keeps the boundary of individual disciplines. As you can see in our example, the same 3 subject areas stand alone, but the theme of where we are in place and time is taught and pushed into each content area, allowing students to make connections on their own. The next design pathway or approach of interdisciplinary learning is best fit for a situation where 2 or more content areas or disciplines are included in the unit. In this particular approach, students focus on gaining new skills rather than just problem solving. This pathway is centered around commonalities and connections between all disciplines. And connections are also focused on by the educator rather than just student-led. In the picture, you can see what this would look like for our second grade content examples. The center theme is where we are in place and time, while all content areas are connected together within that theme and also overlapping one another to visualize the connections being made throughout the unit. The last pathway is known as transdisciplinary, which is an approach that extends far beyond the content that is being taught and allows students to make connections beyond just that. Students are held accountable for their learning, and they're the drivers, while the teacher facilitates and guides where it is needed. According to Hubbard and Colpart, discovery-based activities are highly encouraged within this pathway. As you can see in the picture provided, all three disciplines overlap one another and the learning goes beyond the content areas, creating connections toward one major theme. If we take into consideration the second grade example that was previously discussed, the interdisciplinary approach would be most appropriate for our situation based on learner population, framework, and having two or more content areas that all have overlapping connections with one another. Now that we know what pathway or route we are driving our learning, the next step is to create performance tests or assessments to gauge learning and progress as we move towards our end goal. These tasks and assessments should align with one or more level of Bloom's taxonomy based on your learner population. On the right, you will see the levels of Bloom's, with remember being at the bottom and create being at the last level, the highest level of Bloom's. Your goal for your students is to create a performance task that starts towards the bottom and works up to the highest level achievable for your learner population. In this step, you want to encourage hands-on learning and incorporate technology as much as possible. Performance tasks and assessments should be based on your students' learning styles in your classroom and allow them to show their progress throughout the unit and not just at the very end. All performance tasks and assessments need to align directly with the expectations, standards, goals, and objectives that were previously decided on for the integrated unit created. It is important to tailor these tasks and assessments to your learners and allow them to have a voice and a choice throughout the process. Now that you have your performance tasks in place and you know how you will be assessing learning, you want to create lessons and activities that help guide the learning to the assessment process. The lessons and activities created should be directly aligned to your tasks and assessments seamlessly. You want to provide students with multiple outlets, settings, and again, incorporate technology into activities where it is best fit. Lessons and activities should be differentiated to meet the needs of all learners, and this also means providing extensions for students. You want to allow time and activities that offer reflection, intervention, and remediation to ensure that students have an understanding of the content that is being taught. Again, just like your performance tasks and assessments, all lessons and activities should align directly with your standards, goals, objectives, and expectations. Last but certainly not least, you want to make sure that all lessons and activities are engaging. Make sure that you are meeting the needs of all your students and their learning styles and that they are actively learning and enjoying it at the same time. Differentiating can look very different classroom to classroom, student to student, and even teacher to teacher. There are two categories to remember when differentiating and incorporating that into your integrated unit, and that is modifications and accommodations that you can offer to students, but that also might be required for some students based on their learning needs, IEP, or 504 plan. Let's first look at modifications within learning. Some different ways that assignments can be modified are by having students complete different problems than other peers, chunking the material into smaller sections, or providing an alternate project or assignment. In the area of curriculum, some modifications might include learning different material based on student need, a student being graded or assessed using a different standard, or a student being excused from a certain project or assignment. When it comes to behavior modifications, the teacher could cue the expected behavior, provide frequent feedback, follow a behavior intervention plan that includes de-escalation strategies, or simply just use positive reinforcement. Now, when it comes to accommodations that can be provided within your integrated curriculum unit, we can look at 4 categories. The first being presentation, where you change the way the information is presented to the student. For example, if reading is not being directly assessed, you can offer a read aloud option. The next category would be setting, which is simply changing the learning or work environment for the student. An example of this could be placing them in a more quiet area or room, allowing them to sit somewhere else where they can focus. The third category would be response, and that is changing the way in which the student completes the assignment. An example of this could be providing a keyboard for a student that may have trouble with handwriting. And the last category is timing and scheduling. And this is exactly as it is stated, and that is changing the time for a task. An example of this could be a student completes all the required components of the assignment, but uses additional time or requires additional breaks to do so. As educators, it is important to know when differentiating whether you are providing a modification or accommodation based on the learner population or your students, how you can meet their needs, and what is required of them to be successful in the classroom. Now that you have gone through the process of building and creating your integrated curriculum unit with differentiation, it is now time for the implementation piece, and that is to teach it. You might think this is the end goal, or maybe not even part of the process, but it is actually a very important piece of the puzzle and not nearly the end yet. When teaching your integrated curriculum unit, it is important to follow your unit plan while remembering things happen and it is okay if things do not go as planned. You want to allow for time for reflection from not only the teacher but also the students throughout the unit. Offer students intervention, remediation, and extension opportunities to extend learning based on the data from your performance tasks and assessments. It is okay to slow down your unit to ensure that students understand rather than speeding it up to make sure it is all taught in a certain time period. Lastly, don't forget to collaborate with colleagues throughout the process to discuss progress, struggles, and findings with each other. Remember, as educators, we learn best when we learn from each other. Now that you've taught your unit and assessed your learners, the next step in the process is to evaluate your unit. This could be on an individual basis or a group basis, depending on who taught the unit and whether it was a collaborative effort. The goal of evaluating your unit is to make improvements for the future, whether you plan to teach the unit again or to decide how effective the unit actually was. It can also help to determine whether or not students grasped an understanding of the standards and content that was taught. The first evaluation method we will look at is the team approach. This method is recommended if multiple educators were to teach the unit, rather than just on an individual basis. The goal of this method is to revise the unit based on data, progress, and findings collected within each classroom. With a team approach, you want to make sure the curriculum is doing what it is meant to do, and ineffective components are targeted for a revision. This approach can also include any stakeholders who were to participate in the unit, such as students, or even parents if they were involved. Some questions that can be used to discuss within the group of teachers would be what parts of the curriculum engaged and inspired learners, and what would you do differently next time to deliver the curriculum. The next method of evaluation that could be used to evaluate your unit would be Kirkpatrick's 4-level method. With this method, you target 4 different levels in order from level 1 to level 4 are reaction, learning, behavior, and results. This method is most ideal for implementation of the curriculum in training programs. Level 1 focuses on the opinions of those learning the course after the content was taught. Level 2 focuses on the measures and degrees to which students acquired the knowledge that was taught. Level 3 focuses on the degree to which students' behaviors changed as a result of the unit. And Level 4 focuses on the tangible results of the unit. The last evaluation method we will look at is, the next evaluation method we will look at is action research, was a continuous self-assessment method. It can benefit one single educator or the entire group of educators, depending on the circumstances. With this method, your goal is to identify a problem, develop a plan of action, collect data and analyze it, form conclusions, report results, and then adjust your theory to begin all over again, as in a cyclical model. This method is a great choice for curriculum designers, educators, or trainers that are hoping to improve their own curriculum and instruction. The final method we will look at is big data analytics. This method is based on the idea that the data should be studied from all angles and all connections. Data is looked at from numerous sources, and it is used as proof to make decisions moving forward. This method has many dimensions and opens the door to understanding that data is more than just numbers. To end our webinar, I want to leave you with a few things to remember moving forward in your educational journey. The first is whether you are planning an integrated curriculum unit with differentiation on your own or with a group, it is important to remember your why and the benefits it holds for teachers and students. Take your time with it, follow the process, and trust the process. And most importantly, trust in yourself to make sure you are creating a unit that is filled with content-rich opportunities for your students to build lifelong connections. Have fun with it and don't be afraid to take risks. If you have any questions and would like to collaborate, please do not hesitate to reach out. My contact information can be found below. Again, thank you for your time today, and I hope that you found this webinar to be helpful. Please see the references list on this slide if you would like to seek any further information regarding integrated curriculum units with differentiation.